In today's video, I'm going to walk you through how to record the highest quality video possible out of the Canon Rebel T7. So while this isn't strictly a video-oriented camera, and it doesn't have the highest quality video at just 1080p 30 frames per second, with the right settings and techniques, you can still get some pretty great quality video out of this camera. Alright, like always, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm going to jump right into this video, but if it does help you out, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel. Let's get into it. Alright, so first up, you're of course going to need the best settings to get the highest quality video. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the menu and go over all the settings that I would choose to get the sharpest, highest quality looking video. And then we'll of course get into everything else afterwards. Alright, first up, you want to make sure you're in the video mode on this dial. So select the video mode right there, and then we're gonna go ahead and jump right into the menu. All right, here we go. So I'm just gonna run over all the best video settings. There are a bunch of menus in here. All of these are just more in-depth settings, a lot of personal preference stuff, obviously like setup things. So we're not gonna go into any of these in this video, but I do have a whole video dedicated to the best photo settings if you're into photography and want the best settings for photography with this camera as well. But first up, movie exposure, we're gonna set that to manual. So you're gonna be manually adjusting everything like shutter speed, ISO, and aperture. You're definitely gonna wanna know the basics of exposure and what your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO do. Next up, for autofocus method, I keep this at flexi zone autofocus, but for video I actually recommend only using manual focus. The autofocus in this camera for video really isn't that great, and there's not even continuous autofocus during video. So you can really only focus at the beginning of the video once, and then it's going to be set at whatever it is. So I would definitely recommend learning manual focus and using that for recording the best quality videos so that you can really just make sure it's focused on what you need it to be. Alright, next up, autofocus the shutter button during video. I do enable this so that if you do decide to have autofocus on during video recording, if you ever need to refocus throughout the video, you can just half press the shutter button and it'll find focus again for you. Again, that won't look the best in video because it's going to be hunting back and forth trying to find focus, and it only does it whenever you half press the shutter button. Alright, next up, highlight tone priority. I would actually recommend enabling this if you're in a really contrasty situation with lots of highlights and lots of shadows. You know, whether it's super bright lights, really bright backlighting from the sun or something like that, or just in general, if you're in an area with lots of bright sunlight and lots of shade and things like that in the same scene, I would go ahead and enable this because essentially what it's going to do is lower your highlights just a little bit. It'll raise your shadows a little bit and just basically make the light areas just a little bit less harsh and extreme in your videos. Now, there's not even an issue with just always keeping this enabled, but if you remember, I would try to only enable it in super contrasty scenes and just keep it disabled anytime else when you don't think you need it. All right, next up, page number 2. Movie record size right here is going to be the most important thing that you need to set. So this one, you want to make sure it's not this one or this one. You don't want 480p or 720p. You either want 1920 by 1080 at 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. Now, 24 frames per second is a little bit more of a cinematic look, but it is going to be a little bit choppier for doing handheld and a lot of movement. And then 30 frames per second is going to be the smoothest video out of this camera, which I'd probably recommend for most people, but I do talk a little bit more about frame rate later on in this video. I would say for most people, go ahead and select 1080p at 30 frames per second, and this is going to give you the best video quality out of this camera. Next up, for sound recording, there's no microphone input on this camera, so all the sound you're getting is going to be from these built-in microphones, which, to be honest, these aren't very good quality. But essentially, manually adjusting your audio is going to be kind of pointless. The microphones aren't the best quality anyways. And then obviously disabled, it won't have any audio at all on the video, which I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, obviously you can just mute your video if you need to. So I would always just record audio in case you're gonna need it. And then for the wind filter, I would go ahead and just enable that. It's gonna filter out some of that really rough, like terrible sounding wind noise. All right, the next up, grid display. This will essentially just put a grid right in your screen here, just to help you with framing and composition. So there's obviously a bunch of information on the screen right now. Let me get rid of that. And you can see those gray lines that are pretty much just going across the screen. They don't record in your video at all. They're only there just to help you line things up and get the proper composition. Alright, next up, video system. So there's NTSC and there's PAL. Essentially, these are going to be different video modes for different countries and different areas of the world. If you're in North America and if you want to record 24 or 30 frame per second video, which is the standard again for the US where I'm from, you're going to want to put this in NTSC. However, other parts of the world have different standards, which I believe is 25 frames per second. However, this won't be as compatible for most other things, and I would say generally you're just going to want to set this to NTSC. Next up, picture style. I set this to neutral because I do add a little bit of contrast and a little bit of saturation in my video editing software. So if you plan to do a little bit of color grading with this and color correction, I would set this at neutral, and then you can just adjust things a little bit in your editing software. Now obviously there's other settings like monochrome, which is black and white. Faithful is going to be a little contrastier, a little more sharpness. So I personally always choose neutral just so I have a little bit more flexibility for color grading this footage. Last but not least, these are all pretty much photo settings. However, peripheral illumination correction, I always go ahead and enable this just so it'll kind of correct any issues with the lenses, whether it's distortion, vignetting, or things like that. Enabling this will just kind of correct that stuff in the camera so that your lenses will give you the best quality possible. And there we go, that's finally it for all the video specific settings. But definitely keep watching because now I'm going to jump into all the other tips and tricks I have for you. Alright, now that your settings are dialed in, the next thing I would recommend is getting a fast lens. So for example, this is the Canon EF 50mm f1.8. This is essentially the lens that I recommend for most people as their first upgrade from the kit lens, mainly because this has an f1.8 aperture, which is considered a pretty fast aperture in terms of lenses. So essentially a fast aperture lens like f1.8, f2, or even f2.8 is going to allow you to get much better low light performance as well as separate your subject from the background and foreground a lot better than you would with something like the kit lens. Now while a fast aperture doesn't specifically give you better image quality, the more background separation it gives you over something like a kit lens, it will push you in the right direction by getting that crisper, sharper look. And honestly, having a really narrow depth of field and just a fast aperture in general is one of those easy cheat codes to get more professional looking video. Alright, next up, to get the most natural looking video, you're going to want to follow the 180-degree shutter rule. So essentially what this means is you're going to want your shutter speed to be about double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you're going to want your shutter speed to be 1/60, which is double the 30 frames per second. Now this rule kind of came about originally from cinema, and that's kind of how movies were filmed in, with the shutter speed double the frame rate. So again, just like, you know, a fast aperture lens, shooting at different shutter speeds isn't going to make a substantial night and day difference to your videos. But since the 180-degree shutter rule has always kind of been the cinema standard, our brains just kind of see the exact motion blur that the 180-degree shutter rule gives you, and they just kind of relate that to being cinematic, since that's kind of what movies and cinema in general have leaned towards. And there are other things that are similar to that, like 24 frame per second video. The only reason 24 frames per second kind of looks more cinematic is because that's the cinema standard that most movies have always been filmed in. That's a super quick explanation. It's definitely not the best explanation of the 180-degree shutter rule. But also another thing I always say is you're better off to get the shot than to not even try because you don't have the right circumstances or settings. So if your choice is to either just miss the shot because it's way overexposed, or just crank up your shutter speed as high as it'll go or down as low as it'll go or something like that. You know, obviously no matter what, getting something is better than just not even trying because it doesn't fit your certain circumstances. All right, enough of that rant. Let's move on to the next one. All right, next up, get an ND filter. And I would recommend specifically a variable ND filter, which I'll link a couple budget options down in the description. And so you can get these in, of course, all different sizes and types for pretty much whatever lens you have. But an ND filter is essentially sunglasses for your lens. So if you can see right here, this is a variable ND filter. And so right now you can see it's a little bit darker than everything else. But if I go ahead and turn this, it's gonna darken up even more. So the reason ND filters are useful is if you're shooting in, direct sunlight and really bright, harsh conditions, there's only so much you can do in the camera to lower your exposure. So you pretty much have to crank up your shutter speed or stop down your f-stop to really get a much deeper depth of field, which again, will kind of do the opposite of what I talked about with getting a shallow depth of field. But if you throw an ND filter in front of your lens, you can essentially use that to adjust your exposure and then just focus on setting all your other settings how you want to get the best quality video. That right there is essentially the main use case for a variable ND filter. Anytime I go outdoors and shoot photos or videos outside, I take one of these with me no matter what, just in case. And so like everything else I talk about, I'm gonna link some good budget options down in the description if you do wanna purchase some of them. All right, last but definitely not least, one of the most important things to getting high quality, good looking video is proper lighting. Now that's probably something you already know, but lighting is seriously crucial for getting good looking video. If you don't have lighting, if you don't have the proper lighting, it can make even the best video quality look really bad and bland and plain and boring. So definitely look into and learn about proper lighting for video. And nowadays there are so many different types and price points of video lights of really any type that you can get. Now this is kind of its own big whole topic to go into that I just kind of wanted to briefly cover real quick, because lighting really is one of the most important aspects of getting good quality video. Now this isn't sponsored, but this is just a random little light I've been using all the time. So like for recording B-roll, a lot of the times I might use natural lighting from a window, or if I'm recording outside. You know, obviously the sun is great, good quality natural lighting, but just to get a little splash of backlighting or side lighting or just a different color of light, I've been using this Ulanzi photography flashlight thing. I got this for like $30 on Amazon. And it's essentially just this photography flashlight, but you can zoom it in and out. I don't know how you can see it, I'll try to demonstrate it better, but you can zoom it in and out like that. You can change the color temperature, and that's pretty much about it. But I use this all the time for backlighting B-roll and just getting that extra touch of different colored lighting or kind of direct lighting in addition to your main key light, whether it's the sun or whether it's a huge light like what I have here. You know, it just kind of helps the subject stand out a little bit. It can kind of give you a unique look. But basically what I'm trying to get at is lighting is very crucial for your video quality. So you should really put effort and time into learning lighting and getting the proper lighting for your videos. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped you out, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.